Okay. Yeah, well, this is an accommodation for Sheena. She wants to sit in this low chair. So we have to be, I'm representing the Center for Inclusive Growth. We're being inclusive. She likes to sit low. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dawn Leeks Ragsdale. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Inclusive Growth here in New Haven. And so we're charged with implementing programs and solutions that help every resident in New Haven access good economic opportunities. So I have a lot going on. So first, I want to do a quick plug. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves after I give you a brief overview of what the panel is about. And I do want to say that one of our panelists here, Fred McKinney, that he has a book out right now. It is called Critical Issues Facing America, Selected Essays from a Black Economist, 2016 to 2025. And so as many of you as possible will receive this book today. As you know, as we have supplies, we have a certain number. So we were going to give it to the first X amount of people that came in, but you all were already in here. So we kind of have to figure that out. And Fred is available afterward to do some signing. Okay. All right. So at the Center for Inclusive Growth, we launched our Buy New Haven initiative in December of 2025. And the purpose of that initiative is to help stimulate local procurement and to help anchor institutions access small businesses to purchase from, help them with strategies on how to redirect their spending locally. And the flip side of that is helping the small businesses prepare to make sure they're ready to accept those contracts. Now, we had the opportunity to do a study with Kate Cooney and her Inclusive Economic Development Lab, and everything we learned from the data her students provided us supported this local procurement initiative. One data point that stood out to us was that 66% of our businesses in New Haven earn $500,000 in revenue annually. And so if we could stimulate those small businesses and drive more money into the local economy, we see that as a really strong place for us to put our time, effort, and energy. And so this panel we're bringing together academia, private sector, city government, and foundations to talk about, what are some of the strategies that we can use to drive local procurement. So I'm going to start with Kate, as you are closest with me. I have everyone introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Cooney. I'm a senior lecturer here at the Yale School of Management. Been here 15 years, and 8 years ago, I founded the Inclusive Economic Development Lab. And we offer a city studio course where I work with graduate students and city stakeholders, and we co-design research projects that will support ongoing equitable city building work in the community. And we use an action research model, so we'll do a cycle of work, convene stakeholders, reflect on the work, and then, if desired, create another cycle of work. And the beauty of that is we can remain engaged over a longer period of time, even as cohorts of students sort of come and go out of the lab. We also share out our work on websites, live events, and the CityScope podcast.
Hi, my name is Fred McKinney, and I'm an economist with a consulting firm called BJM Solutions. I lived in New Haven when I first came to Connecticut, moved here in 1976. I was just telling the story recently with $300 in my pocket and no place to stay. And the Yale Economics Department put me up in Trumbull College for the summer, where I started. That's when I started my PhD program. So it was really nice to come back to New Haven. I do research and consulting work, primarily in the area of minority business development and community development. But as an economist, I have a set of tools in my toolbox, and I can take those tools into other areas. And so I'm doing some really interesting work right now, just in pure economic policy analysis with the controller for the state of California. So it's some good work. So I'm glad to be here and talk about some of the things that's on our agenda today, and I'm really interested to hear what your questions are. So I'll turn it over.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sheena Strada Anthony. I'm the Director of Investments at the William Casper Graustein Memorial Fund. We both have very long names. The Memorial Fund made a pledge to align 100% of their endowment toward their mission, which is something rare in the world of philanthropy. And I'm overseeing that charge to make sure that all of our investments are in alignment with our mission, which is equity and education by inspiring the end of racism and poverty. And part of that includes investing locally in our communities in Connecticut and New Haven, and particularly.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Meredith Glasgow. While I serve as our team's Director of Marketing and Database Management for the Connecticut Apex Accelerator, I'm here today wearing my procurement specialist hat, if you will. And what our team does at CT Apex is that we navigate complex opportunities with the federal, state, tribal, and local governments and help businesses understand the steps that they need to take to find success in this space. My particular focus is in New Haven County, so I serve all the cities and towns in the county, and my passion is to make sure those small businesses and minority-owned businesses have access to opportunities with institutions like Yale University.
And my name is Michael Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Economic Development Corporation of New Haven, which is a public-private partnership, and we design policy programs and projects to support economic well-being for New Haven residents. And a lot of that is being at the intersection of the public sector and economic development planning. I believe very strongly that the public sector has a role to play in setting the vision of economic growth and direction and implementing that vision on behalf of local residents. So I typically think of ourselves as scaffolding or a shipyard. We help design and build new programs and push them out to sea. Most recently, that was the New Haven Land Bank that was incubated over 3 years and is now doing housing development in neighborhoods throughout the city. But over the years has included everything from programs like New Haven Promise, programs like Collab, that show examples of our vision of inclusive growth, very much driven by understanding the systems of economics that exist in our city. And glad to be here.
Thank you. So I want to start with a question. Is this on? It is. Oh, okay. I'm going to ask Fred McKinney to start first, and then whoever else wants to jump in. But we often talk about local procurement as the right thing to do. But I'm interested in looking at boutique procurement as a strategic economic lever. How does that change, or how could that change the power dynamics in a city like New Haven?
Great question. I failed to mention in my introduction that I spent 15 years as the president and CEO of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council, which connects corporations, municipalities, state governments, and others to diverse businesses. And we've been going through some dramatic historic changes in the area, in the space that we're talking about that involves minority business. In fact, it's almost like you can't say that word in Washington, D.C. or in many other states and even in some large corporations. In 2023, I was hired by the Conference Board, an organization of large corporations, to look at what their members were doing in this space of supplier diversity. And how it relates to your question is what we did, we interviewed numbers of their members, their corporate members. These are household name companies like Apple and IBM, et cetera. And what we discovered is they were seeing the changes, the political changes, and how it was impacting their programs to include diverse businesses in their supply chains. And what we heard was they wanted to change. They didn't want to get rid of these programs because of these political forces, but they knew they had to change the programs. And so what they did, that they hoped would satisfy the powers that be, was to change the names of these programs. And what many of those corporations did is they changed the focus from minority. They replaced the word minority with the word local. And so you had a lot of corporations that were headquartered in major cities. And because of how the demographics in this country, most of minority populations outside of the South reside in large urban environments. And so they could continue to do business and support that business sort of under the radar screen by focusing on local. Now, that local focus is really important because it's in these local communities that we're talking about where you could argue is the greatest need for entrepreneurship and business development. And, you know, I'd really like to focus a lot of my time on not just the standard stuff that businesses do in terms of employment, in terms of, you know, participating in a supply chain, but I'd like to also look at how businesses interact with the philanthropic sector. The entrepreneurs in these minority businesses and women-owned businesses are often the largest philanthropists in these communities. They are the support, even when they don't live in those communities, they support those communities. So this local focus is important, not just for the success of those entrepreneurs, but for the sustainability and the quality of life in those communities.
Thank you. Kate?
Well, I was just going to echo that there's research to back that up. There's a book called Just Growth, looking at equitable growth across different regions in the United States, that came out about 10 years ago. But one of the correlates of just growth was having a thriving Black middle class in that region. And they thought it must have something to do with both capacity and empathy. And there's a new book out looking at the history of Black neighborhoods from 1970 to the present by Michael Lenz, an urban planner at UCLA, and he finds the same thing. So there's a real empirical basis for that insight too. I would just say that I think it actually is really important to have a vision that comes from the leadership of anchor institutions, universities, and hospitals about why they are investing in a local procurement, diversity procurement, based procurement. That's clearly articulated, and that middle managers understand, and that there are evaluation of those goals and metrics. Because I think the danger, on the one hand, is that you might make decisions and not understand the way you are impacting that local community. And there was a student here, Boris Siegel, in 2015, who worked on a 2-year study evaluating Yale's procurement supply chain patterns. And he found that a decision to move from more local procurement in the food at the local residential colleges to a national broad line distributor resulted in moving millions of dollars out of the local economy that wasn't in the sight lines of those decision makers, because it wasn't something that they were tracking. And there are various important, you can imagine, reasons why the university might have made such a decision, right? It wasn't just price, it was also security and having less trucks on campus and so forth. But that broad line distributor came with its own sourcing, and Boris even went to the distributor and said, maybe I'm missing something, let me look at your books. And they opened up their books, and there wasn't a single New Haven supplier in there at the time. And that just had to do with their own set of decision making about who was near an exit, how could they easily pick up. So maybe the university would have still made that decision, but they would have understood the implications and might have had a way to move those businesses into another part of their procurement ecosystem. So I think having a vision for why you're doing it and clearly communicating that is important for the metrics. And then also just to give your management the space to actually invest in the time it takes to set up those local pipelines, which does take an investment of time, relationship building, and so forth.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because in some of the conversations that I've been a part of, there does seem to be a disconnect between a CEO who is like super excited and really on board with a vision, and then when we're handed off to the person who actually manages that piece of the work, they're not as excited or as interested. And so I'm going to put this down to Michael and Meredith. what are some of the things we can do? Like, how can we shape this conversation? Is like, what do we need to be doing as people are trying to facilitate this change to help these organizations come into alignment within themselves so that we can remedial on some of these things?
I'll speak as the non-procurement expert before handing it over to somebody who knows what they're talking about from a comparing sourcing perspective. But I'll say is that a lot of the pressures that an organization would have to exert on its middle management may not be the only tools that they have in their toolkit. And so particularly for an institution that is large and diffuse between a bunch of different silos, it's a lot of different people making decisions for very different reasons with very different incentives. And I would say that one key thing to think about is the way that top-level leadership uses symbols and culture in order to set the expectations. And a lot of that comes from viewing local procurement not just as an abstract good or an economic impact, but through like the unique value that local products and diverse products have as experiences. And I will also say as staff, I think viewing like purchasing power very broadly and holistically. Some of the largest purchasing power, quite literally, is like the people you employ. That is a major impact on the communities in New Haven and job quality. But in finding things like food, like art, actual supplies, and being able to, at the top level, highlight both the unique stories that local and independent producers have, I think can set a different culture. And part of that is I think you have to lead with something that's on the level of quality, that you start having departments feel FOMO for not having things that they are themselves procuring locally, procuring in just ways, and featuring as like selling points, not just that, oh, here's something I have to do at like a mid-level paperwork. So that requires, building those pipelines. I think there's challenges in both capacity and scale, but it I think involves thinking creatively and symbolically, poetically in a way, to help use those examples to get people motivated and bought in.
I have a little bit of a different perspective as I work in the public sector. So what it looks like for us to include local minority diverse companies is the federal government has goals, small business goals and set aside goals for business types such as women-owned small businesses, veteran-owned businesses, 8A, which are disadvantaged businesses. And those goals are in place for a very specific reason. It's because the federal government has done their research and they found that X amount of companies under this type of criteria can do this work. They work in this industry, they provide this service or this solution to your problem, and therefore you should prioritize using them. Another reason why they prioritize using small businesses is because y'all tend to be more agile. Y'all can adapt much more quickly than a large business can. And those can be very valuable as the government does, really benefit from that time saving. That saves them tons of money. And on the local side, I see the state of Connecticut kind of following suit as to what the federal government does. The state of Connecticut sets aside 25% of all of their state contracting opportunities for small and minority businesses. And depending on the industry, they have X amount of contracts for those businesses. And how they determine that is who is certified as a small business or who is certified as a minority business, what industry do you work in, and therefore there are matching opportunities based on the capacity that we see in the state. So I will probably touch on certifications a little bit later and the importance of that, but that is definitely where they're getting their research from. So it really benefits us all the way around when we are including everyone.
Thank you, Meredith. I'm going to come back to you. So I've seen that APEX CT helped put millions of dollars into small businesses in Connecticut. What are some of the biggest readiness hurdles? When Michael talked about quality, we hear that as a complaint. We don't think the quality is going to be there if we build a small business. We don't think the capacity is going to be there. But what are some of the biggest readiness hurdles that the small businesses you work with can clear before they can seriously compete?
Absolutely. I will say it's usually not a quality issue. The clients I work with, they are great at what they do. It's just a matter of getting you ready and eligible to pursue those opportunities. So before the bidding process even begins, what we do at Apex is walk them through foundational readiness and create a roadmap that is tailored to that business and their goals. And I will say for any innovators in the room, your roadmap will look a little bit different and will probably include specialized planning steps to access funding for research and development as well, as there are programs out there specifically for innovators. But in a traditional contracting sense, we'd want to walk them through completing the necessary registrations, like sam.gov being our main one, as that kind of is the checkbox that gets you in the door to being a government contractor. The other things would be looking and exploring those federal and local certification options that are available to you. I always highly encourage, if you are eligible, please apply, and we're here to help walk you through those applications to make the process more streamlined. And also the compliance hurdles tend to be, the biggest thing, and understanding what the regulations expect of you and kind of how to read through those opportunities. So we'll take the clients through a solicitation from start to finish to make sure they fully understand all of those expectations and requirements, that they can meet things like minimum insurance requirements, bonding levels if that comes into play, and any other standard forms that we'd have to fill out.
Thank you. Sheena, I'm going to come to you now. As you talk about trying to help small businesses be ready, what type of investments or impact grants or investments are you seeing on your side that foundations and similar institutions can make to help these institutions, to help these small businesses become ready?
So there are a lot of tools and investment types and even grant types that foundations can make, and just investors in general. I'm speaking from a foundation, but investors also have power. If you have means, if you have money, whether you're buying or investing, you have a way to influence your local economy. From a foundation standpoint, we invest locally. So we have a portfolio from our endowment, which is an investment, where we can make loans to small businesses. But because we are a foundation, we have the ability to give grants out. So we can create an integrated capital stack where we're able to give a grant and then also a loan at a lower interest or a longer term time horizon than a traditional investor can make. That is not unique to foundations. There are a lot of investors who also have the ability to give grants if they have giving fund, a donor advised fund or something like that. They can give grants out. And then if they also have means and assets to invest, they can also make their own individual longer term low interest loans as well. So although I'm speaking from a foundation, individual investors can do this, individual people can do this as well. It's just that we don't always know about it.
Thank you. Now, Fred, you have an essay. Did everybody get a copy of the book? Okay, yeah. One of the essays in the book is 10 excuses for not doing supplier diversity well. Let's change that. 10 excuses for not doing local supplier investment well. When you talk about the shift to community economic impact, can you talk a little bit more about that, what that means, and how we should be looking at that?
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad you didn't ask me to remember the 10 things. I might remember 2, but read the article again. But I will say this focus on community is really important, and I think, again, I think you guys have put together an excellent panel that covers different aspects that are necessary to have the type of impact that we, I think, all desire. And to me, what I have seen, again, from different perspectives, one of the perspective of a nonprofit leader who is trying to connect minority businesses with large corporations and also trying to develop those minority businesses and also trying to develop the supplier diversity program within those large corporations. And that was essentially across industries, across cities, across regions within New England. If I focus now on the local aspect of this, for what I see as really necessary and what's missing is a hyper focus of bringing leaders together within a community to say, let's develop, what is the vision here? Do we like what we see? about this community. If there are some things we don't like that we need to change, what do we need to do to change those things? And I think Kate's point about the institution, it involves all of the large institutions and some of the medium-sized institutions and the city government. I did a report a few years ago for the city of New Haven where we looked at the procurement practices at the Q House on Dixwell Avenue, which was a publicly funded project on Dixwell Avenue in the heart of New Haven's black community that did not have what I would consider, or anybody would consider, adequate minority participation on that project. And so here you have money coming into a community, but it did not stay in that community because the firms in that community didn't participate in that project. So, you want to prevent those types of things. You want to plan for those types of things. So I think that communities need to be at the table when decisions are being made about investments in the community. New Haven has to, and it's not just a New Haven thing, it's the greater New Haven community. Because one of the things that came out in that study was the city of New Haven had a decent supplier diversity program. But it was phenomenal compared to the neighbors of New Haven. The neighbors of New Haven had nothing. But the New Haven had opportunities where companies from the surrounding communities could participate in the city of New Haven's program because they couldn't discriminate. But the businesses in New Haven didn't have the same opportunities in the surrounding towns. So it was a one-way street. And that's not good for economic development of the region. If the local businesses in New Haven can't have similar opportunities in East Haven and in Orange and in Milford and in Hamden, but those small businesses can come into New Haven and get contracts in the city of New Haven and also work with, companies, private companies that have contracts with the city of New Haven, then we are missing out on an opportunity. And I'm not saying don't let businesses from East Haven compete on New Haven projects, but there should be some reciprocity. I mean, fair is fair. And so, but that takes bringing leaders to the table and say, okay, we're going to change this, and this is why we're going to change it. And guess what? It's not bad for you if the city of New Haven develops its diverse businesses and its minority communities to be more economically sustainable. It's good for these communities. And so that's the challenge, is how do we sell it? How do we sell growth is good for people throughout the community?
Michael, I'm a little off script here, but I know that you do bring people together for these kind of conversations. How do we make sure that we're starting the conversation at the right time, with the right people, in order to make some of the changes that Fred's talking about?
Yeah, I'd start with, I don't think there's a wrong time, and I don't think there's wrong people. This should be something that we're expecting from all of our institutions. This should be something that we're talking about frequently. And to Fred's point about the importance of leadership in exerting these changes, but also the importance of accountability. So particularly on the public sector procurement side, there's a whole range of different ways that they've created structures to evaluate, whether it's formal targets or state targets. There's plenty of ways through and around those structures, though. And so that prioritizing rewards and incentives for leadership that actually is willing to make the changes does have an impact. And probably one of the clearest examples locally here is about 2.5 years ago, the New Haven Parking Authority removed several words from some of their contracts. And they just deleted the phrase good faith effort. And that is a meaningful shift in working with the general contractor who previously had to make a good faith effort for diversifying their subs. And without that, knowing that they were going to be accountable both for that contract and more importantly for future contracts. So you're actually scoring the success of a project on the basis of them successfully meeting their goals. They more than doubled participation from registered minority and women-owned businesses, and won an award the last 2 years from the NAACP of Connecticut for those procurement changes. And that took an executive director who believed in those changes and was willing to make that a priority. It took a board chair of the New Haven Parking Authority that made it a top-level institutional priority. But those are also not necessarily the things that will get you promoted within a structure. And so being able to both recognize the changes that need to be made, which are not giving excuses, and having a sense of accountability for evaluating things on a 5 or 10-year horizon, but also then being able to recognize that if this is a goal that we care about, we should be rewarding, praising, and supporting those people who are able to effectively make those changes. Because I think that's how you get the pressure and the culture to grow.
That's great. And just to clarify there, so you're saying that at the parking authority, they went from, if you give it a try, to we're requiring you to do this.
Yeah, so the good faith effort provision can mean a variety of things depending upon how it's evaluated, but it can go as simple as if you post it on the website and wait 3 weeks, if you send emails to a list of people who are registered with the state, but it meaningfully matters if you are actually evaluated on your success in meeting those metrics, because there are enough contractors of good enough quality and capacity registered with the state to be able to deliver on this work. And it shifts. These are all competent construction managers or general contractors or other firms. They can find and work with new people, but there's a natural incentive simply because you have the ease of the relationships you already have to work with the people you've worked with before. And if you work with the people that you know, the biases of our natural networks are going to mean we're going to get the outcomes we would expect. And so I would say that type of technical legal changes are the things that we can start adapting more places.
One interesting thing about that is Connecticut just completed a disparity study at the state level, looking at procurement, who was ready and able, and then how many of that group was actually receiving contracts, and they think they found disparities on every demographic group, essentially. But one of the things in the recommendations was to define good faith effort, because there were too many quick checks that the notice and the 3-week wait was enough. And they gave us example of a 12-point plan of what a good faith effort actually entails as part of that report that they gave to help to strengthen what that might mean.
Well, I think as anybody who's applied to a job on LinkedIn in the last 5 years knows that just because somebody's required to post something online does not mean it's a real opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I think that the standard of good faith effort is still worth holding people to, but we should also be evaluating them on actual performance on past contracts.
Kate, I was going to follow up with you. Michael brought up a best practice, and I know that your research, you're studying models across Cleveland, Chicago, Baltimore, and other cities. Does New Haven have any unique attributes that you think position us to do something that you've seen somewhere else before or haven't seen somewhere else before?
I think New Haven is unique in that it's a small city compared to the other cities you mentioned, Cleveland, Chicago, Baltimore. But it's got big city energy, right? And there's a lot of entrepreneurship activity. We've got a lot of young people, students, a lot of home-based businesses. And so I think what we see other cities doing is really helping develop that business ecosystem, that business develop ecosystem, to try to stitch together and align better capital, the right technical assistance, aligned with that opportunity for growth. And I remember when I first started teaching courses on equitable city building and inclusive economic development, hearing from people at Kresge that in their work, the business development was the hardest of all the things that they did. And it's because you need to align in a careful way that technical assistance with the right capital at the right time. And it's tricky, right? But I think some of the things we've learned through the interviews we've done in other cities and case precedents investigations is some interesting approaches to doing that. So in Philadelphia in 2021, they were really had a huge study looking at their entrepreneurship ecosystem and thought about what they could do to really increase their capacity to move businesses to that next scale of development. And one of the things that they did was they created a bench of technical assistance providers, people providing marketing, insurance, legal, credit clearing, and accounting, back office setup, and they subsidized access to those technical service providers, but it was through a CDFI. So it was at the moment a small or medium-sized business was applying for growth capital that they got access to that subsidized, affordable, high-quality technical support. And what I thought was ingenious about it is that it helped both sides of that relationship, because the small business got the right technical assistance, affordable at the right time, but those professional service firms that were providing technical assistance also grew their book of accounts, developed more expertise, might begin to specialize, and all of that expertise rebounds to the entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. So I really like that example. And then another one in Baltimore, some of you may remember Stanley Tucker. We brought him here for a live Cityscope recording, but he ran the Minority Women, Veterans, Disability Small Business Fund in Baltimore for many years. And he created sort of what you're talking about, a continuum of capital alongside that public fund. And so instead of diversifying the technical assistance, he diversified the kinds of capital. And he would work with a small business and ask them what their plan was. What's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? Do you want to have a lifestyle business and, have a beach house? Do you want to sell the business? Do you want to franchise? Whatever that plan was, they put together the kinds of capital you would need. And he had one deep bench of technical service providers, which was back office accounting. And you could not even start working with him until you opened up that shoebox, showed him all the receipts and the messy, ad hoc business systems you had developed, which had gotten you this far. And he set you up for growth with a good back office accounting system, and then provided the right kinds of capital for those different stages of growth. So I think on the procurement side, it's a similar challenge of aligning that opportunity with the right kind of capital and technical assistance, not just outreach about the opportunity, but more of a combination of support and scaffolding.
So I think I'll stop here to do a shameless plug for one of the programs at the Center for Inclusive Growth, because we actually are offering no-cost back office operational support using local technical assistance providers. The program, we've been piloting it, and it's going really well. And so it will launch probably close to September. But so we're trying to fill some of this gap that exists. And I know from my own business, you need help with those back office
taxes.
things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sheena, just as we're talking about things we've seen all over the country and you're constantly traveling around, what are some of the things that you see that you think might be good to bring back here and maybe implement?
Oh, I've seen so many things. But before I get into that, I just want to echo what Kate mentioned. I know for us, we invest a lot in intermediaries who provide the technical assistance and then also capital to small businesses, because we understand how important that is. We also understand how during those beginning stages of a business, how vulnerable businesses are, and they need an investor who's willing to take the time to work with them. When they go into trouble, they need someone who's willing to say, let me sit down with you and figure out how we can restructure your capital stack or get a new client and things of that nature to come in, versus saying, you know what, you defaulted and we're closing on this loan and just making them go down the rabbit hole. So we do a lot of work with CDFIs and organizations like the Center for Inclusive Growth who provide that type of support. In regards to innovative things that I've been seeing lately, so one of the things that have been on my mind is economic growth. And how do you keep money within a city? And I look at New Haven, if we're not hiring locally, that means that the money that's in the city is not being distributed into the city, meaning the people aren't being employed, they can't afford to live, and things of that nature. Usually if you're spending locally, investing locally, those businesses are hiring folks locally. They're investing in their local communities and things of that nature. However, there are hurdles, institutional hurdles, which some folks have mentioned from a procurement side and investment side, that keeps institutions from being able to invest. They can invest locally, but from doing the work that they need to do to invest locally. So what does it look like from a community standpoint to invest in a business to get it to a scale where institutions will start to look at you? And those are things that I've been looking at, of like cooperatives, investing more in CDFIs, things like the Center for Inclusive Growth, so that these organizations can work with these local businesses, get them to a scale so that institutions can start looking at them. And not just like the local institutions, but once investors or people who spend money start seeing that, oh, there's money going to a city, that means other people outside of that city will want to start pouring their money into that city as well. It's like a multiplier effect. So how can we start doing this small and building the scale up? I don't know if I answered your question, but those are things that I'm looking at.
Thank you, Sheena, for that. You reminded me of something that I did and attended. I shouldn't say I did. I attended a trade show in Chicago back in around 2000 and maybe around 2000, and it was the Food Marketing Institute, which is the trade organization for the food industry. And at that time, I was an entrepreneur. I had a patent on a machine that distributed whole bean coffee in a grocery store automatically. I thought it was a great idea. And so we went off to the grocery store show where we would try to sell this thing. And we were probably one of a handful, literally a handful of black exhibitors at this show, the largest grocery store show in America, that probably had 20,000 people in the industry attend this show at the McCormick Center in Chicago. Now, because it was in Chicago, Jesse Jackson found out about it. And Jesse Jackson contacted the Food Marketing Institute and asked them a very simple question. Do you have any black vendors that are going to be exhibiting at your show? And they frantically looked and they went through their database and they said, yeah, we got 5. So Jesse said to the head of the Food Marketing Institute, well, I want to have a meeting with those 5 vendors and the heads of every grocery store chain in attendance. And so I got a letter and a call from Jesse's office, and he said, Fred, we want you to attend this meeting. I said, I'll be there. And we sat around the table with the CEOs of Stop and Shop, Ahold, which is the parent company out of Quincy, Massachusetts, Safeway, Kroger, Giant down in Pennsylvania. And we sat around the table, and Jesse said, again, something really simple. This is simpler than we make it out to be. Jesse said, you guys are going to do business with every business in this room. And they did. It was that simple. But that's leadership. So I think the lesson for New Haven is get the leaders in the room. Get the community in the room. And the community will tell you what they need, what they want, and how the leaders of the larger organizations can help. And it's not a heavy lift for these large organizations. And so it can be done, but it does take some leadership. And I know we're in a capitalist economy, but we need like a 5-year sort of plan that talks about, okay, what do we want? And my good friend Paul McCraven is here from Concord that's doing phenomenal work in New Haven. But that came from vision, what they're doing at Concord. But that's the kind of vision that we need for this community and, quite frankly, every community. And I don't know how long this is going to last, but I did want to just get in briefly that I no longer live in this community. I moved down to Prince George's County, Maryland. And one of the reasons I went to Prince George's County, Maryland, was because of the demographics of Prince George's County, Maryland, and the power and business dynamics of Prince George's County, Maryland. The former Prince George's County executive is now the senator, U.S. Senator for Maryland. The governor of Maryland is an African-American man. The Baltimore mayor is African-American. The mayor of Washington is African-American. It's not to say that that's what's required, but when you have power and you combine that power with vision, you can change people's lives.
Thank you. So actually, the first time we're almost out. I think that was a great moment to shift to some questions from our folks that are in attendance. So if anyone has any questions, this is your moment.
Hi, this is for Mr. McKinney. So you've mentioned several times about getting the leaders in the room and the community who are just living their daily lives are really truly not aware of all the things that you all mentioned. So how do you, I guess my question is, how would you expect that to happen if the community itself is not aware of who to talk to about the problem? And it ends up being a barbecue conversation about what happened at work last week versus an actual conversation about movement forward.
Well, good question. I mean, the leadership is not just corporate leadership, city government leadership, educational leadership, institutional leadership. It's also community leadership. So there are leaders within this community that have the ability and the knowledge to bring people together. And I mean, that's not easy. I know it's not easy because everybody has interest. And, you know, when I think about this community, I'm talking about, okay, well, who are the leaders? Let's look at the buckets. You've got an entrepreneurial class within the community in New Haven. You've got what I would call a church class within the community in New Haven. You've got a bureaucratic class, people who work in the public sector. You have got also a managerial class. You got to find the leaders in these different buckets, bring them together, and say, hey, look, we're not happy with the conditions in this community. And we're not saying what specifically should be done, but something needs to be done, and it needs to come from you. So, you know, that's where I think it is. And, you know, it was interesting. I said it on the previous session, and it was, I came in late, but I wish I had been there for the whole period. It was about opera. I said, well, you know, opera. But they talked about the civil rights struggle in that session. And I think we have to go back. I'm not saying that we have to do the same things, but we are in a unique period in American history right now that requires communities to not try to go it alone, individuals, because that is a recipe for disaster. And what we've seen is where communities come together, they survive and they thrive. So it's leadership within the New Haven community. So, you know, that means, you know, check your egos at the door and let's figure this out together.
It's echoing off of what he has to say, though. Okay. So just to give you some real examples, because as Fred was talking, I thought of examples that I've seen with traveling. Most of the innovative solutions I've seen in cities that I've gone to have come from the community. So I was recently in Asheville, North Carolina, and there's this cooperative called Poder Emma. It started because this woman wanted to create a cooperative, a land trust almost. And she literally just went from door to door to door in our community and asked folks would they be interested in purchasing the land that their home is on. And that's how it started. It took them years, like I'm not gonna say it was easy, it took them years, but just from her going door to door and finding her local community, members, she was able to expand beyond just the housing cooperative. They have business cooperatives for technical assistance, business cooperatives for daycare, for construction workers who work on the homes on that land. And it really just started from one person knocking on the door. And now she has institutional investors throughout the country who's looking at Poder Irma. And there are examples in Boston. There are funds like the Boston Ujima Fund. There's a Dudley Land Trust. In Philly, there's a Kensington Land Trust. And this really just started from community members. So I just wanted to share those examples with you. You're welcome.
And I think one reason why before I said there's no wrong people to be talking about this is because collectively, like, we all have a role in a political process. I think we often don't necessarily have an expectation that politicians are supposed to have an economic vision for running a city or a level of government. But the rules that we set up as government shape where you can start a business, where you can't, how our land is used, where and how you're moved around a city. And those decisions fundamentally shape what our economy looks like. And so when the public sector makes a decision, there's a bunch of creative ways from around the country that we can be exerting that shared leverage. And so, for example, a developer who is active in Science Park brought a model in several of his developments down in DC. He actually writes into the leases that he has for his tenants that they have to post the jobs for the retail stores in a local hiring pipeline for 2 weeks before they can be posted publicly, so that there's an automatic notice and leg up for people who are going through local hiring initiatives. There are ways that we can be talking about who's cleaning and supporting a building. Are those full-time jobs? Do they have benefits? What are the ways that we can use the levers that we have collectively as the public sector when we have input into a development to ensure that job quality is something that's featured? And I'll say, I just came from earlier today, announcement of a new building in downtown New Haven with a new several hundred jobs that are coming to the city. Is a type of example of when the public sector has a role to play, what are the expectations we have for what the people in the room are negotiating for on our behalf? And what are we asking those politicians to support and to say? And to Fred's point about a collective 5-year plan, I have the joy of running an organization that actually has a federal EDA-recognized 5-year plan that we're currently 3 years into. Over the course of this fall, we will be announcing the 18-month planning process for our next 5-year plan that is from the public sector trying to articulate where are we trying to move our economy. So I will say often there are many barriers to participate in that, and we would like to be working with everybody in this room to partner on input into articulating what does it mean to have a shared economic agenda for our future, and what is the role that governments, private sector, and institutions can all play in trying to move in that direction. So, great question.
Yeah. I'll just echo some of what Fred has also said about combining that organizing and work to build political power with those system building efforts, right? Because it takes a while to set up the pipeline to be ready to take advantage of the joining in on all this construction at that level, right? And so, university procurement pipelines can set up systems that, not only provide outreach about opportunities, but also maybe a 2-week course about how to put together a bid. And then as part of their systemic process, put you together with those procurement directors who are actually making decisions, just as a systemic process, right? And then give you feedback on your bid. I think a lot of the focus groups we've done, people are running around to Zooms with 500 people, they said it's like applying for a job on the internet where you're getting 500 opportunities, none of which seem aligned to what your business is. University of Chicago has an initiative where all of that is streamlined systematically. They work with a group of anchor institutions where you can put in your business information, and it's all online through an app, and they will help match you with specific opportunities and then put you in touch with the actual procurement officer and then give you some consulting alongside of that. So there are ways that we can, just build systems that help ease all of these efforts as well.
If we have time, I just want to add, I would really encourage everyone in this room to tap into your resources as well. I think businesses often don't understand how many resources are available to you and that they are usually free. So it really doesn't cost you anything to go and search for those things. I will say, shameless plug, Apex services are also all free, so everything that I mentioned I can assist you with at no cost. Something else is that we've built strategic partnerships around the state specifically for this exact thing that we're talking about here on the panel today, is because when we're talking to the businesses and y'all bring a problem to us, an issue, an idea, we don't just sit on that idea. We spread the word and we determine who's the best person to get you in contact with to give you that holistic support. And we also host and co-host networking events like industry days and matchmakers to put you in front of those key decision makers on the procurement side to tell them your solution to their problem that they might not even know they have. And that can be a really great way of turning a connection into a long-term contract.
Okay, folks, we have 2 minutes left. Is there another pressing question? Okay, well, I'm going to ask a quick question because I think, hearing this young lady here talk about, folks are at a barbecue talking. And we did, the Center for Inclusive Growth, we did several community meetings where we went out to talk to the community about what inclusive growth meant to them and what they wanted to see. One of the things that was very striking in those conversations was how much how little ownership the people in the community really felt. They were always talking about a they that was way out there. And so it dawned on me, we need to do some sort of work so that they can think, I can be this woman in Asheville, North Carolina. I actually can impact the things I'm seeing in my community. I'm just wondering if you all had any thoughts or strategies around how to get people to see themselves that way.
We recently did a Cityscope Live event where we interviewed Richard Townsell and Whitney Smith from North Lawndale Community Development Corporation, and they've done remarkable things, and they always start with, they said, a handful of people, and it really starts with organizing. And once they find out, they keep asking the question why, until they get to an actionable thing they can campaign around. So